All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. First off, thanks everyone for coming. I'm really happy to have our panelists here. We have a great group of people. I'll try to keep this to an hour, be respectful of everybody's time. I think we just start off. All of our panelists go down the line, introduce yourselves, your role, and your institution. We'll start off with you, Andy. That's all right.
Sure. Sounds good. So, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Andy Webb. I am currently a neurocritical care clinical pharmacist at Massachusetts General Hospital here in Boston. I don't know if you want me to give me like a little bit more of like my background or just my role.
What do you want us to know about you? That's great.
Oh yeah, perfect. Sure. So I give you like a little one-liner about myself. So I did obviously my Pharm.D at the University of Rhode Island. So I had a really great time over the 6 years that I spent at URI. After I finished my Pharm.D, I did my PGY1 pharmacy residency at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and then did my critical care PGY2 specialty training at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon. After the completion of my residency training, I started here at MGH in neurology and neurocritical care specialty, and I am the kind of dedicated clinical specialist for the neuro ICU here at MGH. So my clinical practice is obviously in the neuro ICU, and my research interests and research activity is also in that space. I'm involved in 2 randomized controlled trials that are going on in the unit, as well as several larger retrospective studies that we're doing as well. And I'm also involved in the neurology residency program for physicians, as well as the pharmacy and critical care pharmacy residency program for pharmacists as well.
Everything impressive. Thank you so much. Commander Benson, are you comfortable going next?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me. That is a tough act to follow for sure. So Lieutenant Commander Andrew Benson, class of 2011, been in the Navy for about 11 years. So I'm a pharmacist in the Navy. I've done roles ranging from very clinical on deployments in Afghanistan and trauma settings to very administrative, where I am right now at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and everything in between. Also had unique opportunities to support Congress as well. So the big thing about the Navy for me has really been the large variety of different opportunities that I've had over the course of 11 years in the organization. The University of Rhode Island was a great experience for me. 6 years really got me prepared not only to be a great clinical pharmacist, but to be a leader. And that was very important, as I started my career in the Navy as well. So happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Dr. Waldeck?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Waldeck. I am a clinical pharmacist at Stony Brook University Hospital, which is in Stony Brook, New York. It's on Long Island, for those of you who are not familiar. I am a pediatric clinical pharmacist. I have been working in pediatrics for many years now. I'm also the residency program director of our residency program, our PGY1 residency program here at Stony Brook University Hospital. I graduated from University of Rhode Island in 2014, and I went on to do my PGY1 at Stony Brook University Hospital, and I stayed ever since. So I worked a number of roles to get to my kind of dual roles that I hold now. I first started as a staff pharmacist, then became a nutrition support pharmacist. I did nutrition support exclusively for almost 4 years before making the transition over into pediatrics. I actually worked in the neonatal ICU before I came to my current site in the pediatric ICU. So on a day-to-day basis, I am normally in the pediatric ICU now, but I kind of help out as support for the entire children's hospital. Like everyone else, I absolutely loved my time at University of Rhode Island. I miss it dearly still, but I'm really happy to be here and be able to kind of share my experiences and be able to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Pacheco?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name's Avery Pacheco. I graduated from URI in 2020, so not that long ago. When I graduated, I first started off at CVS, and I was a manager at the West Warwick store. And now I'm an ambulatory care pharmacist at Coastal Medical, and now also Lifespan, since we merged together with them. Also went to URI, like I said, so I love my time there, definitely very valuable. And also at Coastal, I'm the primary API preceptor for students.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Ross?
Hi, my name is Drew Ross. I am not Bianca, that's my wife, but I am not technologically literate enough to change my name. I feel very outclassed by my incredibly impressive peers on this panel. My interest is in pharmacy and healthcare leadership. I graduated from the University of Rhode Island Pharm.D. MBA dual program in 2016. I did not do a residency. I started as a staff pharmacist at Roger Williams Medical Center. I was able a few years after that great experience to take an opportunity as a medication safety and informatics pharmacist at South County Health, where I became the team leader and the manager, which I had been doing for the last several years. And actually just this month, I've taken a bit of a pivot to a completely different role as the administrative director of our primary care, express care, and Center for Women's Health service lines. Just an example of how a clinical background in pharmacy and a desire to be a leader can really carry you anywhere in healthcare, not just within a pharmacy department, but really as part of a team in just about any setting. And it's nice to see you, Andy. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and Commander Benson. I don't know if you remember me, but we passed like ships in the night in Kappa Psi. I think I was just starting off in pharmacy school when you were a P4 already. But it's nice to see you both, and to the other panelists, hello and welcome everyone.
And great to see you, Drew. I think it's a good testament to how close-knit URI is, that even though we're all each a couple of years apart from each other, we have a lot of mutual connections.
That is awesome. For everyone in attendance, I'm hoping for this to take a very casual, informal, dynamic question and answer format. So feel free to unmute at any time, ask a question to anybody or the group. If you're more comfortable putting in the chat or even direct messaging me, I'll read it out loud. We can go from there. And otherwise, to fill the silence, I have plenty of pre-written questions we can work through. So just to get us started, we've already talked about basic introductions, everyone's backgrounds. Just start us off by walking us through your day-to-day responsibilities, what a day in the life is like for you in the neurocritical ICU, or for you, Commander Benson, in the medical center.
Yeah, so I can get started. So yeah, in terms of a day in the life, I think that's the life of a clinical pharmacist is kind of interesting because there's a fair amount of structure to my day, but every day is a little bit different. So my day-to-day life during my kind of service component of my job is I am embedded within the medical team of the neuro ICU. So the neuro ICU that I kind of oversee as the pharmacist is a 22-bed unit, so it's a relatively large ICU, made up of two medical teams. So there's kind of a neuromedical service and a neurosurgical service. And I am the rounding clinical pharmacist primarily with the neuromedical service. So in the morning, I kind of look at my panel of patients, I kind of chart review everybody, make sure I kind of get a sense of what their clinical information looks like, how they're doing from a hemodynamic and neurologic perspective. Then I go on rounds with the team. So the team consists of a neurocritical care attending physician, a neurocritical care fellow, a neurology resident, 2 nurse practitioners, and myself. And we basically go room to room, discuss the plan with the bedside nurse. I provide input about kind of the safe and effective use of medication therapy. I do a lot of therapeutic drug monitoring for anti-seizure medications or antibiotics or other medications that require kind of drug level monitoring, as well as provide recommendations of kind of like, you know, how to best manage a patient from a medication perspective. The team is incredibly collaborative, so we all kind of rely on each other to assess the patient, get a sense of what's going on, and kind of make a plan for the day. And once I'm done with my rounds, it's kind of my afternoons and the rest of my days can really be quite variable. I sit on like a whole bunch of hospital committees, which I think those of us who work in healthcare systems are probably all very familiar with the various committees that we get involved in. I may be on meetings for the various research projects that I'm tangentially involved with, or I may have with a learner, like a resident or a student, and we go over educational topics, or we'll talk about disease states and drug monitoring. So my afternoons really are quite variable, but are usually a mix of some component of education, research, or administrative tasks of kind of getting everything teed up from the unit perspective. But every day is a little bit different, which keeps my job exciting.
Another hard act to follow. So I'm kind of in a weird role here. I've been at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, which is one of the largest military medical centers we have worldwide. It's in the DC area. It's in Bethesda, Maryland. So I've been here for about 2 months or so. My role is a little unique. I'm actually not working full-time in the pharmacy. So I work as a deputy director for administration. So that's 7 different departments that are all having support functions, ranging from facilities to patient administration, nutrition support services and those types of things. So pharmacy is not actually one of the departments that I'm overseeing at the present moment. I am privileged, and I do staff here occasionally, so I do maintain my credentials and work, make sure that I'm up to speed on everything going on in the pharmacy world. But my day-to-day typically doesn't touch on pharmacy too much. It just depends. So the director that I'm part of is about 1,000 staff, 7 departments, which with about a $250 million budget. So a pretty big chunk of what the hospital here operates. So like Dr. Webb said, very day-to-day changes, but for the most part, my morning starts off with meeting with leadership from the hospital, and that ranges from the director of the facility to a variety of different directors that are leaders, mostly nurses, physicians, and administrators. I'm the only pharmacist that's there, which is kind of neat. The word that he used was collaborative, and that's kind of a really important word, I think, when being a part of any health system, because you can't do anything by yourself, and you can't do anything with one specialty. And so I think pharmacists always, have a unique role and responsibility in the healthcare system. And it's always good to be able to branch out and touch as much as you can and help where you can, because that's kind of how you find success in an organization. So mostly my mornings are the same with leaderships and rounding and things like that. But in the afternoon, usually putting out fires and dealing with other administrative things.
I guess jumping off of Dr. Webb's description of his day-to-day is much like mine. And I do agree. I love it that every day is a little bit different. I have kind of a core structure of generally what I'm doing at specific times, but every day is going to be a different combination, especially when you're working in a critical care unit. You never know what kind of patient you're going to be treating that day. So you don't know what research question is sitting around the corner for you. So I won't rehash the full day to day, but just to kind of talk about my unit that I work in a little bit more. I work in the pediatric ICU, as I mentioned. We're a 10-bed unit. We range from everything. We are a trauma center, so we do get traumas in our unit, as well as kind of respiratory viruses, sepsis cases, different things like that. Post-surgical, neurosurgical patients. So we kind of see a little bit of everything in our ICU, which is kind of neat. Obviously the challenge of pediatrics and weight-based dosing, you may have an infant and in the next room you have like an 18-year-old teenager. So it really keeps you on your toes in the clinical fields. I am part of an interdisciplinary team on that unit as well. We round every morning. So at 7:30 every morning, I'm up there with the team. I pre-round in advance, and then we go through patient by patient, make a plan for the day. I make sure all the orders that we talk about are put in appropriately, all the medications are dosed correctly, calculated out correctly, and also we have to play with the dosage forms a lot more for us in pediatrics. So I always make sure we're providing it in a safe and appropriate way to measure out the dose appropriately. So that's kind of where my differences lie in that. Running the residency program, I have a little bit more administrative work in the afternoon, kind of putting together educational plans for the residents, but also precepting them as well in pediatric rotations. So my administrative duties are kind of very different depending on what's going on that day. So for example, ASHP just came to reaccredit our program this year. So that kind of took up a lot more administrative time doing all of the preparation work and reports for that. But now that that's over, I can really focus more on education with our residents.
Much respect to you working in pediatric critical care. That is a very daunting, very diverse patient population.
Yes. I love it though. I love the challenge of it, and you never know what's going to happen next. So, and then I kind of am a support for the rest of the children's hospital as well. So every once in a while, I'll get called over to our oncology unit or you run our neonatal ICU and help them out with some things too. So there's some other stuff that's thrown in on a day-to-day as well.
Dr. Pacheco, how's the ambulatory care? How does your day usually start?
It's pretty good. And I have to say my boyfriend just got hired at the Hasbro pediatric ED. And so I hear a lot of the crazy stories behind it. So like Russ said, much respect for what you do. Kind of freaks me out. So as far as my job, I work at Coastal Medical, and there's about 13 primary care offices. So we have more of an office-based role where we work out of the corporate office for the most part. They will basically, they set up our days. So each day is the same Tuesday through Friday, and we rotate through. So for example, for me on Tuesdays, I'm doing blood pressure monitoring. We have a remote patient monitoring program. So we're able to have our patients submit blood pressures from at home. And then we have a collaborative practice agreement so we can titrate their medications based on their blood pressures and reach out to them if they have any alerts for hypertension, things like that. And then in the afternoon, we do INRs and Coumadin dosing. So we also have a protocol that we follow so we can dose patients warfarin within, a 5 to 20% medication dose change. We can change that on our own. Wednesdays for me are drug information days. So there's basically a queue where all the 13 offices, if they have any medication question, it'll be sent to us and we'll address it that day. So that can really vary between a lot of things. Most of it is maximizing their diabetes medications, but sometimes we'll have some one-offs where it's saying, which of these drugs is causing their urine to turn blue. So just kind of a mix of anything that day. So I'm always learning a lot, which is nice. And then Thursdays, I also do INRs again, and then Fridays is my patient visit day, which is my personal favorite. On that day, we'll basically have visits scheduled for patients that need maybe some diabetes medication teaches, medication packaging, or med recs. And then Mondays kind of rotates for everyone once every week. So it's a little bit of either drug info or remote patient monitoring or patient visits. And then we'll also outreach some patients based on our contracts with insurances to do some complete medication reviews and go over their meds with them.
Sounds like a fair amount of things to juggle. Respect to you as well.
I guess I will. I'll chime in last. My days, within pharmacy and healthcare leadership, they're very similar to what Commander Benson said. There are a lot of meetings with a lot of different folks. It's a very collaborative job working with nursing leaders, physician leaders, administrators, all sorts of people. And I would say that what you do, regardless of what level of leadership you're in, you're probably spending half or hopefully less of your time putting out the fires of the day and dealing with things reactively. So that would be, if there was a medication error, looking into our system and how could that have possibly happened and how can we prevent it in the future with strong steps. A lot of there have been anyone who has a job in pharmacy knows there's been supply chain issues where certain drugs are on back order and very difficult to get. And we are trained very, very well to know what the optimal treatment is for a patient and the second line treatment. But when the first and second line treatment is not going to be available carte blanche for your entire population, figuring out what your strategy is going to be as an organization can be challenging. And so that's sort of the reactive side of leadership. And the more exciting part, and why I was always interested in a path like this, is sort of the proactive and forward-looking part where you're designing what you want your future state to look like and how you want healthcare to be and pharmacy to be. Being in a small community health system gives me probably a lot more influence over what that's going to look like than if I were in a larger health system, which is something I love. One of the most recent things that we as a department had been pushing for a long time at South County Hospital was to have a transitions of care pharmacist focusing on discharge education, because we already had a robust MedRec program for intake. And over time, we were able to build a business case to say this is actually not only great for our patients, but financially great for the hospital. And we were able to bring a wonderful pharmacist named Demetria on board to serve that role. And, to me, those are the sort of projects that are most rewarding, finding ways to expand pharmacy and improve patient care in a way that doesn't just cost dollars. That's the stuff I get excited about. That's sort of what the day is broken down into, some of column A and some of column B, hopefully more of column B. But realistically, there's a lot of fires. I should wear a fireman's hat sometimes.
Creative problem solving, ever important. We have a great question in the chat for everybody. It says, each of your jobs is unique. How did you choose your path? And at what point in your Pharm.D program did you know what you wanted to do? Whoever wants to chime in first, be my guest.
I'll jump in. because I think everyone's going to think that you have to have it all figured out in pharmacy school. I'm living proof that you don't. When I was in school, I liked cardiology and geriatrics and kept thinking I was going to go down that road when I was going into residency. But when I was in residency, my site has a pediatric rotation, and that was the first time that really struck a chord with me. I was always afraid of it and kind of avoided it. And funny enough, that geriatrics, pediatrics kind of went the full opposite end of the spectrum. Nutrition was another area that I experienced in residency that also really I found very fascinating. So that was really the first time that I even thought like, oh, these are kind of interesting things for me. But even then it wasn't, this is what I'm going to pursue with my career. I really was still, I came out of residency still undecided and decided to just continue working as a staff pharmacist and just kind of continue to explore what's out there. I happened to be lucky in the right place at the right time when the nutrition support pharmacist role opened up at our institution. So I decided to pursue it. And nutrition support is not really something that is something we get a whole lot of education on. So I did have to kind of self-teach, self-learn and study the field a lot more to become comfortable with that content. But quickly found a love for it and a passion for it. And that was really my gateway into kind of the path that I have led now, and kind of what nutrition support led me to the neonatal ICU, which now led me to the pediatrics world as a whole. So I absolutely love it, but I always say like it kind of found me and kind of took advantage of opportunities that I was presented with along the way. So I guess with that being said, that I probably discovered it later than most would, but I kind of am also one of those people that I would be happy doing whatever I would be doing, but this is, I now know years later that this is my true passion and where I want to be.
So I can jump in here and kind of talk about what led me to the Navy. It really was about service to my country. And I don't know if I really know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think that's part of the challenge. But the benefit of being in the Navy is every 3 years, you're typically moving, you're working in different places, you're working in different settings. I never thought that I'd be working in a NICU pharmacy, a year after I graduated from pharmacy school. That didn't occur. That was where I was going to be. But that's what happened. My first duty station was in San Diego. I showed up, I got training in outpatient, then I did a really heavy deep dive into inpatient and ICU, intensive care and trauma, because I was ready to, preparing myself to go to Afghanistan to do a different type of pharmacy job. And so I guess service is what drove me into the Navy, and the variety is pretty much what's kept me. And so like I said, I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up. And so to say that, you're not going to know in pharmacy school, that's a definite truth, because I still don't know now 11 years out, because I'm enjoying everything I'm doing, and I'm enjoying kind of sweeping and working in the circular motion back in between all the different settings.
Yeah, and I think that I can kind of echo everything that everybody else has said, that you don't need to know what you want to do on day one or day 2000 or whatever 6 years is, right? So I think when I entered pharmacy school, I had like a general sense of what a pharmacist did, and I like had a sense that that's what I wanted to do. But I think that like every single year of pharmacy school, you kind of discover something new about the profession and some other path that you'd never even considered. And so I think the best piece of advice is really like, as you kind of go through school, as you go through pharmacy school, is really just exploring as much as you can. And so like going to things like this, like meeting people who are doing interesting things, you like be really surprised about what some of the interesting things that pharmacists have the capability of doing, whether that's in clinical practice and some of the really unique areas of clinical practice that pharmacists find themselves in, or something completely unrelated to clinical practice, whether that's the pharmaceutical industry or administration in some other phase. I mean, there are people I know that ended up going either maybe like a medical school, or they got an MBA and now they're in finance. And I think the Pharm.D is a very flexible degree, and you can really find yourself in all sorts of different ways. But for my like particular path, as I kind of went through pharmacy school, I developed like a bit of a clinical interest in neurology specifically, and I kind of saw myself actually going into an ambulatory care role, where I kind of like that aspect of kind of helping manage patients' medications on a day-to-day basis in the outpatient setting. And then when I did my APPEs, my fourth year rotations, I selected one of my electives to be critical care, specifically because I had not really seen that before and wanted to make sure I kind of had a nice, well-rounded experience. And after I took my MICU rotation, I was like, oh, this stuff's actually pretty cool. So it was really that rotation that sparked my interest in critical care. And then I kind of spent a couple of weeks in a subsequent rotation within the neuro ICU because I thought maybe I could pair my two interests. And it was at that point during my P4 year that I really kind of found that passion. And then in residency, that kind of continued to solidify that passion, but I also developed several other kind of sub passions like infectious diseases and all those other sorts of things. So as you kind of go throughout your career, you'll find all sorts of things that really interest you, but they definitely don't need to know anytime soon.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with what everyone else has said. I mean, when I started off at pharmacy school, I was an intern at the same CVS store for 5 years. So I just was pretty sold on that. I thought that was like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was pretty convinced. And then I just kind of realized once I graduated, my favorite part of working at a community pharmacy was really just counseling the patients and spending time with them. And then I did reflect back on during my rotations, I had the opportunity to be at the VA in New Bedford in an AmCare setting. So I just kind of started exploring that more and kind of just going off of Dr. Waldeck. I really think self-teaching is so important. And I think being in pharmacy school, they really teach you that skill. I mean, medicine's always changing, so you have to be willing to self-teach if you want to give your patients the best care. So switching over from community pharmacy to AmCare kind of a year after graduating, it definitely was a lot of catch up for me, I feel like, on guideline reviews. But I think if you're willing to put the time in for the job that you want, you can definitely find yourself there and take those opportunities on rotation to kind of figure out what you're looking for.
And I would say very similarly, I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to be. I knew right away going into URI that I was interested in the Pharm.D MBA program. I knew somehow I wanted to marry my interest in numbers and the business aspect of things to healthcare, because I hear people say things in a very grand and vague way that there's a crisis and healthcare is expensive and patients won't be able to afford their meds and the system is. I said, okay, what does that really mean? I wanted to understand that. So that was sort of the impetus for that. And I worked at Charlton Memorial Hospital while I was in school, and I decided health system pharmacy was definitely more for me than a retail road. And I didn't really get a lot of exposure to ambulatory care or some of the other opportunities that were out there. But I certainly did like health system pharmacy. So I started as a staff pharmacist doing that. I did not do a residency program, but I call my first 2 years as a staff pharmacist my residency without a residency, because I was just hungry to get any opportunity and sit on any committee and work on any project that I could possibly do to learn more and grow. And by taking advantage of those opportunities, I was able to get that medication safety and informatics job. And I found out I absolutely love those things too. And I found out that I love, healthcare finance as well. So, and, all these things are just different facets that presented themselves at different stages of my education and at my career. I had a very vague arrow pointing in one direction, but I didn't realize how many opportunities and different twists and turns you could take from what seems like a very clear arrow when you're starting out, and it becomes more and more vague when you realize how much is out there.
I love that. It's a vague arrow. I think that's a very, very good analogy for like finding out what you want to do with the Pharm.D. We had a little question in the chat. If you could briefly elaborate on what nutrition support pharmacy is and what it entails. I think that can only be Dr. Waldeck.
Sure, I could take that. Yeah, sorry, I kind of skipped over the nutrition part. But yes, so in our institution, the nutrition support pharmacist works out of the main pharmacy and oversees our parental nutrition ordering and verification workflow and process. So that was kind of my first clinical role, was really overseeing that. So the way our hospital works is all the different teams write their TPNs, we call them, but the parental nutrition orders get written. There's one single pharmacist every day who is responsible for verifying all of those orders. For those of you who don't know, parental nutrition is basically an IV bag with nutrition in it. Could be up to 30 different ingredients in it. So it's definitely a high risk medication to both compound and administer to patients. And you have to make sure all the doses of all of those things are correct and safe for the patient. And also making sure they have the right access that we can provide for them too, meaning do they have a central line versus a peripheral line, different parameters we have to check. So it's really important to have a single person who really knows their stuff about those orders to make sure that you're preventing any medication errors with that. So really overseeing that workflow on a day-to-day basis, being the primary person to look at those orders every day. Now this can also range from patients of all ages, although at least 50% or more of all of our orders in a day are for our neonatal ICU. So that's where the pediatrics kind of started. You can kind of see that. But again, dosing becomes that much more critical because these babies are so tiny. You have to make sure that you're dosing everything very precisely and correct. So you really don't want a lot of distractions with that. So really overseeing that entire process, also the compounding of it too, which we used to do in-house, but I also oversaw transitions. We actually outsource our compounding now. So administrative work, like overseeing that workflow transition, was also something that fell into my responsibilities at that time. But hopefully that's helpful to throw a little bit of insight on a nutrition support pharmacist. I also sat on an interdisciplinary committee. I still sit on it now, actually, as well, with dietitians to talk about any enteral or parenteral nutrition issues throughout the hospital.
I think that was perfect. That was really informative. Thank you. Commander Benson, go ahead, Dr. Ross.
I just wanted to chime in because to me, it's absolutely fascinating hearing about that entire side of things that I've never really been extremely exposed to. When I was in school, I took nutrition. Of course, we all have to take that, and I took the pediatrics elective. And if I had to pick two things that were opportunities, we'll say, for me to improve on, and that I did not want anything to do with as I started a career, it would be those things. And it's just, it speaks to how varied the opportunities are in pharmacy, because when I hear you talking about what you do, I think, oh my goodness, that sounds like a nightmare to me. And I hear the passion in your voice when you talk about it and how excited you are about it. It's really interesting to talk about these career paths because I couldn't imagine doing what you do. It's very, very impressive, and it's really, really cool.
Thank you. I enjoy hearing about everyone's different roles. I mean, just so many different things that you can do. So it's like you said, I think it's great to hear what everyone is doing and kind of all the different possibilities. And you can also change your mind along the way too, and change and do something different.
Certainly. Speaking of remarkable things people could do, Commander Benson, could you tell us a little bit more about the role of the pharmacist in an area of operations like Afghanistan?
Yeah, sure. And just the segue on the TPN comment and how scary those moments can be. I mean, I remember, processing TPN orders and checking them for NICU, babies. And the first time I did it, it was terrifying, no doubt. So I'm sure that everybody can relate to how scary that is because of how precise things need to be. So just to talk a little bit about Afghanistan, the word collaboration, I think, comes back. It's really about building teams and being a part of the team so that they look to you when the time is right. So in Kandahar, I was at a Role 3 facility. Role 3 would be typically not near the point of injury. So if there was a gunshot wound or if there was an explosion, first care would be what's called like a Role 1 or like buddy care or a medic care. They would typically then take it to a Role 2, which is like a forward surgical team within a few hours, and then a Role 3 would be follow on, that day or the next day. And it really depends on where the injury happened to begin with. So I was in Kandahar, which is a pretty big base. It had about 30,000 individuals on it. And there was about 200 staff that were all Navy. So we're in the middle of Afghanistan. There was no water. And so just keep in mind, that's what they call me, a sand sailor, because I've never been on a ship, but I've been deployed to Afghanistan. But in that role, we were really members of the trauma team. There was only 2 pharmacists there. There were 6 trauma teams. We were there most of the time, and things kind of waxed and waned. Trauma came, it got really busy, then it got quiet, which is those scary moments when it was quiet. But anytime that there was a casualty that came into the trauma bay, whether it was a gunshot wound or was an explosion or an amputation or anything along those lines, the trauma team looked to us to help them in those situations. And that ranged everything from mixing really complex strips for ACLS or ATLS or any kind of algorithms for providing critical care, to calling rates and helping nurses, helping staff. I mean, when you have a triple amputee and you have, you know, an orthopedic surgeon and a trauma surgeon and nurses, everybody's kind of got to know their role and their place. And so the other pharmacist that was there and I did a really good job of kind of proving, you know, that we knew what we were doing and we were part of the team, and they looked to us to do a variety of different things. I say that's important because not everybody would have that experience. It really depends on kind of how open you are to getting involved. Because I do know that other folks who were on the same deployment never left the pharmacy. They were more focused on, you know, taking care of the inpatient, outpatient mission that was going on outside of the trauma stuff, and they weren't too heavily involved in the trauma care part of it. But that was my experience. I'm very appreciative to have that experience. Most definitely will be probably the most rewarding job I'll ever have in my entire life was during that 7 months, because I really felt like I had a hands-on, you know, making a hands-on difference every single day. And, you know, being there that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to serve, and having that opportunity I thought was an honor, although scary at times. But that's, you know, in a nutshell, kind of how the experience was.
Well, to say that was remarkable is an understatement. So thank you for your service there. That's really incredible. I think that just speaks to the really, again, diverse roles a pharmacist can play and the unique values you can offer no matter where you are. Has there also been any good stories about little like times when you really provided really unique benefit as the pharmacist on that team?
I mean, there are a lot of interesting situations, and I don't want to get too specific into the details. But there were times where, you know, even the most talented trauma providers didn't know specific algorithms or the next steps to take in certain cases. And there were a variety of times where we were able to kind of intervene and be like, no, like this is the way, not Mandalorian, but this is the way to process from here. And that took courage, because it was very talented, very smart, very, you know, very talented people. And so, you know, that took some courage, but there were a number of those moments where I felt confident that I knew what we were doing, and we had to make sure that we had to follow the right process. And in that type of culture, everybody listened to everybody, because that's really what leads to success. But yeah, there's a few moments like that I could think of that were, you know, kind of extra rewarding.
Yeah, I can definitely agree that if you're the kind of person who likes kind of getting your hands dirty from a patient care aspect, that I think like emergency medicine and critical care are really like the place for you. And especially like one of the interesting things about pharmacy practice is it can vary so much across the country. And so I was kind of lucky enough to be able to train on the East Coast as an API student, in the Midwest as a PGY1, on the West Coast as a PGY2. And every place is like a little bit different type of role for the pharmacist. And I think in particular, my PGY2 in critical care, there are a lot of opportunities where the pharmacist is fully embedded into the bedside care of the patient. And so especially in the emergency department, there's 24/7 pharmacist coverage in the ED. There's always a pharmacist available. They respond to every single trauma. They are at the head of the bed for every level 1 trauma. And so there are a lot of really awesome opportunities where, you know, it was an ED attending, a trauma attending, 2 nurses, a resident, a pharmacist, a respiratory therapist, and we all have a very critical, very defined role. And there are lots of opportunities where like a very, very sick patient who had a very, very bad injury rolls into the emergency department. And because we're all kind of know exactly what we're doing, my role as the pharmacist, where I predicted every single med they were going to want to have. So I kind of had this little like satchel of drugs with me. And before I could like see the words coming out of their mouth, I'm like, oh, the nicardipin's already hanging. The 3%'s already hanging. Like I already have fentanyl drawn up. And so you have all of these things kind of ready to go. And I was the one really deciding the doses, deciding when is what kind of appropriate to get that ready, kind of counseling, nursing on administration. And so kind of there are lots of opportunities for pharmacy to be very involved in direct, like very much so direct patient care. And in terms of like differences in licensing and scope of practice, in the state of Oregon, pharmacy practice is quite advanced. And so I had the full license ability to administer medications. I could really like be very involved, hands-on at the patient's bedside. And so there are lots of opportunities where that collaborative kind of experience was critical to making sure the patient had a good outcome.
Also muted. Another question for the group. Just generally speaking, I know you learn most of what you do on the job once you're out of school. Is there anything specific you wish you knew on your first day that maybe you didn't learn until a little bit while later, or maybe a lot later? Could be interpersonal interactions, just general little tips and tricks.
So this is something I pretty much always end up having a conversation within the first 2 months with one of my all of my residents at some point in time. And it's, you do not need to know everything right now. What you do need to know is how to find the information, which I think is something that coming out of URI, we were very prepared for, as far as like how to find that information. Okay, I don't know the answer to this right now, but I do know how to answer it. I always see these like new graduates, like new residents coming in, fresh out of school, studying for NAVLEX, and like, okay, I need to know everything there is to know ever. First day of rounds, they get asked a question and they just go wide-eyed, like, oh, I don't know. The panic sets in. So I think that's really shifting that mindset of, yeah, there's going to be really hard questions that are thrown at you. I don't know everything. I know that I don't know everything, but I do know how to find answers. And I also know how to do that research, but also know, okay, maybe this is a question that there is no answer for. So let's kind of figure out how we're going to approach this, or maybe this just isn't a path we should go down. So I think that's kind of a long-winded way of kind of just to sum it up again. You don't need to know everything on the first day of a new job. A lot of that comes with experience and time. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just because you have that degree doesn't mean you're done with the learning. That's a lifelong process. You're going to continue to build on throughout your career.
No one ever believes it, but when you learn drug information, and I know it's taught differently now than it was when I was at URI, but when you learn drug information from Dr. Ward, that is the most important skill you pick up at the University of Rhode Island, and it is what differentiates you from people who won't go to other places. It is the most important thing. I wish I knew that when I was in the class. I tell everybody that and they don't believe me. And I think 9 out of 10 graduates would tell you that that was the most important thing they picked up at URI.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, big concur all the way around on that one for sure. And just to talk about not knowing things on your first day, I think the general idea of get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a good tip for first day of residency, but that's a good tip for any role in pharmacy and getting into a new situation. Because I always have the philosophy is if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning, you're not changing, you're not getting better at anything or what you're working on. So I always kind of have, that feeling. I was like, well, if I'm not comfortable doing this thing, that means I'm learning a new skill set, or I'm trying to move forward and trying to do something different. And then just being open to trying new things and learning, and then being part of a team. There's no doubt that the most, really important things you'll learn, you need the clinical skill set because you can't be a pharmacist without it. But you can't forget about the leadership skills. You can't forget about the team building skills. You can't forget about how medicine is collaborative, and building connections with other people you work with, pharmacists or not pharmacists, is a really important skill set in itself.
That was like the most perfect answer to that question I could have hoped for. Thank you so much. I'll let Dr. Ward know. I'm sure she'll appreciate the shout out. Our next question in the chat says, thank you all for taking the time to meet on this panel. What are your staffing requirements? Do you have flexibility with your schedule, weekend commitment, and/or find yourself bringing your work home with you? With a question mark.
Yeah, so I can start with this one. So I like my schedule is actually like relatively set and pretty good, I would say. So my staffing requirement, I kind of have like a clinical service component where I'm on the unit, I'm rounding, I have responsibility for all the kind of clinical decision making and whatnot for my unit. So I have a 5-week rotation where I'm 7:30 to 4 p.m. I'm on the unit. That's like Monday through Friday essentially. And then the 6th week is a evening staffing component. So I work 2 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. just every 6 weeks, Monday through Friday. And that's where we kind of cross cover each other's units. So I will cover the neuro ICU, the medical ICU, and usually like one other ICU, like the trauma ICU. So it's kind of like a heavy workload, but it's just order verification. So it's a little less of that kind of active discussion. It's more so kind of reacting to orders that are getting put in and answering questions that get posed. So that's kind of my strict like staffing schedule. And I think from a clinical perspective, that is pretty good. I do work every fourth weekend, which I think is fairly standard for most kind of hospital staffing types of positions. It is also not such a bad thing. I don't really mind my weekend shifts. And I think in terms of the question about taking your work home, I think this is going to like really vary from kind of pharmacist to pharmacist. And it really does kind of depend on how much you want to put into the job and how much you kind of want to get out of the opportunities that are available for you. And so like for my particular passions and my particular interests, I will say that like I do take work home, not like an exceedingly large amount of work, but especially for like the number of projects that I sign myself up for, I am definitely the kind of person that has a hard time saying no. And so I do find myself sometimes kind of finishing those things at home, but oftentimes they're kind of labors of love. So I really enjoy spending that time getting, to contribute to a big study or to kind of work on a protocol that will help patients down the road in my unit. So I really don't mind spending like a couple hours here or there after work, kind of getting that work done.
I can go next from the outpatient perspective. So I work in the primary care offices, so it's really just revolving around their hours. So for the most part, I work like either from 8:30 to 5 or 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. So most offices, except for our like urgent care offices, are only open on the weekends. So we don't have any pharmacy coverage on the weekends, which is nice. As far as bringing work home with you, I am able to work from home. So that in itself kind of creates a tough environment to step away from my laptop. So sometimes I do bring it home, I would say, but more of that is kind of going off of what Dr. Ross said. Since I just started in AmCare last year, I'm still kind of completing my own personal residency. So still kind of learning things at night and making sure I'm on top of things for my patients the next day. But I think, like Andy said, it's kind of it's going to vary between pharmacist to pharmacist as well. So it's kind of what you want to take home at that point.
If you step into the pharmacy leader space, you will be taking work home with you. And if you look at my schedule, it is Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, with no weekends and no holidays. In a much more real sense, it is probably closer to 60 hours. And being a good leader means being available. So even though you're not necessarily part of a call schedule, if you are a good leader, you are really always on call for issues. And a hospital or a health system operates 24 hours a day. So if you don't want to take work home with you, and I always tried to help my staff and my pharmacy team never have to take things home. I always try to set that expectation. But if you do want to move into a leadership role, have a realistic expectation, because the schedule on paper for healthcare looks very, very nice. But the actual reality of it is it's a deeper commitment. You have to like what you do, and you will be putting in more than 40 hours to do it. And if you like it, I like it, it's not a big deal. But just understanding that is what it actually means to be there, and the hours on paper are not the hours in reality.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you there for sure. And but most of the time when you take it home, it's stuff you want to do because you're typically helping folks that you want to help, and that's kind of why you're in leadership to begin with. For the Navy, it's really dependent on the job I've been in. As I was more junior and kind of a new pharmacist, I staffed a lot more. I worked weekends, I worked nights. Now in a mostly administrative role, I staff when I staff the pharmacy now, I'm staffing during the week, just during regular hours. But my day to day, I'll say, is 7 to 4:30. But I get calls at night. I get calls on weekend. But it's not something that bothers me. It's something that you have a conversation with your family about, so we got to understand expectations and like this is the way it's going to be for these reasons. But it's part of being a leader. It's part of helping others, and so it's nothing that I don't necessarily like. It's just every once in a while you like to have vacation, but the phones and emails have followed you home, so that's just part of the job.
I would agree with that too. And I would say with the way my role is administratively, there are busier parts of the year for residency. There are less busy parts from an administrative side. Obviously, application season is coming soon upon us. So there's going to be a lot more work and a lot more taking stuff home just because the workload is heavier. But right now I can kind of close everything up at the end of the day and leave on time. So it really does depend on the time of year, what I'm working on and what needs to be done. I tend to be I might stay a half hour to an hour late on a day-to-day basis just to kind of wrap everything up that I need to. Again, I do get an occasional phone call. Usually it's a pediatric question and something that's just easy for me to answer, but not necessarily easy for someone just in the main pharmacy to answer. So something like that, that'll take me 2 minutes on the phone to save them an hour's worth of work. More than happy to do that from a clinical side of it. For me personally, my schedule, since I am the residency program director, my department sees that as a supervisor role. So I'm kind of one of the supervisors in our pharmacy. So I work Monday through Friday, about 6:30 to 3 o'clock. And that's just kind of balancing more to accommodate my PICU responsibilities. So that's my day-to-day. Our other clinical pharmacists do work weekends, so they work every other weekend. They get 2 days off during the week to make up for those weekend days. So just kind of give you an idea of like someone in a similar role as me who doesn't have the RPD side of it. That's what they would work at our institution.
Yeah, hospitals never sleep. But I really liked Commander Benson's note. It is intrinsically rewarding work, I think, which helps pad that a lot. I think it makes it worthwhile when you're putting that extra time here and there. We only have a few more minutes left. Just to close us out, I'm going to leave this up to you guys. If you like to go around and you'd like to tell us either one thing you really love about your job, or if there's any additional advice you'd like to offer to incoming students or students getting ready to leave and go on rotations, the floor is yours. Give everyone a minute to think.
I could jump in. So my biggest piece of advice is to take advantage of the time that you have in school. Challenge yourself, push yourself, really explore what's out there. I think that's what's really going to make you the strongest pharmacist, clinician, regardless of where you end up. You only get one shot at this program. So, it's take advantage of it. Utilize your resources, push yourself, take advantage of opportunities, whether it be organizations or classes or electives or the challenging API. Just go for it. You'll never know what you'll find. And even outside of school too, residencies, take advantage. You never know what opportunities are lying around the corner. That's really how I got to where I am now, is just taking advantage of a series of opportunities. Every experience you have under your belt is going to make you that much stronger in the long run. So, thanks.
I'll do a callback to Dr. Ross's, I think he said vague arrow. So school is a lot more straightforward and life is messy. And that's just the reality of the world. And so I think keeping your mind open is really important as you progress through pharmacy school, because you never know what you're going to be wanting to do. You never know what you're going to get yourself into. But it's not just a one straight path. I mean, I firmly believe that when I was, a freshman starting the 6-year program, like, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to finish pharmacy school, and I'm going to live my life. And that is as far away from the possible truth as it's been, because it continues to change. So challenge yourself, like she said, and learn what you can in school. And then when you're a pharmacist, don't forget, you're also going to have a life too. And it's part of, finding what's rewarding for you in your career and balancing it with what's important to you in life is a really important part of being a pharmacist and being a father or a husband or a brother or sister or son or a daughter. It's not as straightforward as you think. That's all.
I guess I can go next. I think that one kind of dovetail both things that you had asked. I think that the thing that I love most about my job, or the thing that I find the most rewarding about my job, is the kind of collaborative aspect and kind of the best parts of my position are being able to kind of help make decisions and impact patient care as a part of a team. And so I think one of the pieces of advice that I could give students is really seek out opportunities where you get to work on a team and get to like know other people and see how other people work, and get to meet people, make those connections, because you never know kind of what is going to be in store for you after graduation. And the better you are to set up in order to be successful and effective on a team, as well as to have a really big network of people that you can reach out to and rely on. Not only is you're probably going to be better at your job and like be really relied upon and be valued at your job. I think like it's really nice to be able to be valued and be seen as an asset to a team and really contribute to that. So as a student, kind of setting yourself up with those skills is probably the best thing that I could recommend early on in kind of school career.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone else said. I think a big thing is making connections too in the pharmacy world right now. I think, like we've said before, pharmacy is a really, really small world. And I think having those connections can really help you explore other career paths down the line. And just don't feel like if you find yourself after graduation in a job that you don't feel like is right for you, then don't be afraid to make that move and explore other things. I stepped out of my comfort zone, moving from community to AmCare. I have one friend who is in community pharmacy, and after we graduated, she just applied for residency and matched, and she moved to California. So it's never too late to apply for residency if you decide that that's something you want to do later on in life too. That's definitely an option. So just don't be afraid to move out of your comfort zone and make those connections.
Yeah, kind of a funny connection is one of our PGY2s in critical care last year is in the Army and did his PGY1 at Walter Reed. And about, I think, 10 or 11 years after his PGY1 at Walter Reed, went back for PGY2 in critical care. So it is really never too late to kind of change your path.
And I guess I'll give two pieces of advice. One, your rotations are some of the most valuable weeks of your life that you will ever have. You can get so much out of that time by pouring yourself into it, asking for more, and trying to do things. When you have a real job, you have real responsibilities and things that you actually have to do. When you're on rotation, you can spend every minute trying to learn and improve yourself and expose yourself to as many different things as you want. It's a very unique opportunity, so make sure that you seize it to the absolute fullest you can. And the second piece of advice, and it sounds a little wishy-washy, but it's very, very true. Opportunities and chances and interesting positions, and they come to people who try to see the glass half full and find the bright spot in situations. Being the positive person on the team goes a very, very long way. So I would encourage you to do that. We need all the positivity we can get. Sometimes it can be difficult to be a pharmacist in any role, and being the person who makes your team smile or smiles with your team can really carry you a long way.
I think that's the perfect note to close out on. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much for coming and giving us an hour of your night. We really appreciate it. You had really great, unique insight and perspectives. We'd love to hear from it. All of our students, thank you so much for attending. You can tell your friends this will be recorded. We're going to post it later today, maybe tomorrow, so people can go back and watch it as they please. Other than that, you're all free to go. Thanks so much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.